All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to learn something from Mr. John Ritter. I think some of you have already met him, some of you haven't. John Ritter is an American illustrator and post-pop artist whose vibrant depictions of celebrities and popular culture have consistently defined the pages of the New Yorker, Time, GQ, the New York Times, and Harper's Magazine. Ritter began his career in Northern California in the early 1990s, where his unique creative style and deployment of color landed him a slot on the design team that created and marketed Adobe Photoshop. Since then, Ritter has seen his uncompromising interpretations of film, writers, musicians, and politicians work their way into the collective American psyche. Never regulating himself to a single format, his work is seen not only in numerous national and international publications, but also in Broadway advertising campaigns, corporate art installations, product packaging, and gallery exhibitions. New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Pittsburgh. His art graces is a collection of Academy Award nominated composer.
You don't have to read it all. That's okay.
Okay, then
Let's end it there. That's good.
John Ritter, give him a round of applause.
Thank you. That's super boring. Who needs to hear that? Right? Okay, well, so I'm super excited that you guys are here. It's so cool that you're doing this in the summer. You may not even know how cool it is, but it's so nice to see kind of what different people do. So the big question is, why am I here? I'm just some guy, don't live too far from here. Why am I here? I'm here to kind of offer you, a little window into something that's maybe a little more alternative. I think you've heard a lot from the sciences, right? Over the beginning of the week. What is this? Monday, Tuesday. So I'm gonna show you some images. I'm a picture maker. That's what I do for a living. I make pictures that tell stories. And how I figured out what I wanted to do was a little bit unusual. So I'm going to just share with you a little bit like how I got to do what I'm doing and kind of thoughts on where I'm going from here. I don't really know what I'm doing. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you. I'm 52 years old. I know what I've done, but I don't really know what I'm going to do. So, from the time I was 5 until now, it's been kind of a like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm just doing the next thing that's in front of me that interests me. Okay, so is anyone wondering why there's a skateboard up there? Like, what's up with this guy? Why is he showing us a skateboard? Are there any skaters in here? All right. So skateboarding for me is central to my career. Skateboarding as a culture, skateboarding as an activity, skateboarding as a creative outlet, and as kind of like a way of viewing the world, okay? When I started, this was my very first skateboard. I got this when I was about 10 years old. I liked it so much I took a photograph of it. I set up this little photo shoot with paper and took a picture of it. So for you guys that skate now, and gals that skate, this is what skateboards looked like in the early 70s. They were plastic bases, urethane wheels, really kind of unfunctional to what we have now. So those of you who don't like skateboarding and couldn't care less about skateboarding, it's not really about skateboarding what I want to talk about. It's really about like what you're into, So if I ask you guys right now to close your eyes, just everybody close their eyes. This will be a little weird, but just do it anyway. Close your eyes and think about the thing that you like the best? Like what, if there are no limits to what you can do on a, let's say a Saturday or a weekend or something, and your parents aren't bugging you, and your pastor at your church isn't, you don't hear that voice in your head, and you don't hear any authority figures, what is it that you would really, really like to do? What is your favorite thing? What is it that you're passionate about? And I don't want to know. Don't tell me, because I don't really care. But you should care. You should totally care, because if you know what you're passionate about, or you know what it is that you're interested in, right? Take note of that, because it might actually go somewhere. Okay, so for me it was skateboarding. So when I was your age, like all I really cared about was skateboarding. And right now, what I do is I make art. So you can open your eyes if you have an idea of what you like. So I make pictures for websites. I make pictures for magazines, for books, for movie posters. Anybody that needs a picture, I make pictures. And I do it in a certain style. I'll show you some stuff that I do. But this is something I just did on Monday. So this is for BuzzFeed. It's a web news site. These guys called me and they said, hey John, can you do this illustration? The new iPads are coming out. Can you do an illustration for it? So you guys that we did that little exercise where we did the narrative thing with pictures, that's what I did here. It was like, oh, how do I show the new iPad? How do I make it interesting? So I took the idea of the iPad, coming down from heaven. Oh, the iPad, how amazing is that? So I did this illustration on Monday. I emailed it to the client in New York, and it was live on the website at like 3 o'clock on Monday. I got paid $500 to do it. It took me 3 hours. That's what I do. Sometimes projects are really long, sometimes they're short. And that's how it shows up. So how did I get from here with this passion to here? So that's kind of what I want to talk about. I grew up in a town kind of similar to this, a couple hours away. It's me and my sisters. My dad worked in the steel mill. This is what I did when I was your age. I was building jumps. I was riding my bike. I was skateboarding. It's like nobody was really skateboarding because it was, the early mid-70s. But I just had a passion for going fast, and I liked wheels. So that's what I did. So these are things that I was looking at as a 10 to 15-year-old. Hot rod magazines, riding dirt bikes, racing motorcycles. Somehow, so they gave me a GQ magazine. You guys know GQ? Has anybody heard of that magazine? It's like a fashion magazine for guys. And I got this magazine and I was like, whoa, where is this world? Because everything was very slick and everybody looked good. And it was fashiony, And I thought, wow, this is like the whole world. I don't know anything about this world. Where is this? Because I grew up in the country, just a very different environment. But I did take note, and I was like, that's cool, I like that. And then I also, would go to the skate shop in Greensburg, a neighboring town, and I would get magazines, right? So skateboarding magazines. So I'd look at those, and I'd see these pictures of kids in California with long hair. So of course I grew my hair out. I think I'm going with the no hair versus this hair particularly, but this is a poster that every guy that I knew had this poster in their bedroom. This is Farrah Fawcett. And Farrah Fawcett was a skater, right? So she was like a TV actress. And you could buy skateboards with her famous poster on it. I just thought that was great, So I get through high school. Nobody in my family went to college. And nobody in my family even suggested that I might want to go to college. So I was like, well, I don't know. Should I go to college? I didn't really know. I didn't really give it much thought. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you guys, I'm pretty clearly remember what it's like to be in middle school and high school. And it's like, yeah, whatever. It's going to work. It's going to work itself out. And I think that's cool. That's a good way to take it for now. But it's also good to kind of know that there are some options out there. And you don't always have to take the traditional route. So I think some of the sciences, some of the traditional fields where like you figure out what you want to do, you go to college, you study 4 years, then you do another grad school and all that stuff. That's totally legit for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody. And it certainly didn't work for me. Because I wasn't exposed to anything. I didn't even do anything like this, so I had no clue what the options were. So for me, it was like, I just wanted to have fun. That was probably my main directive. I was not a good student. I got C's and B's pretty much. I was talking to Brent and I was explaining to him that, I kind of thought maybe I had like a learning disability or something. Because I couldn't understand why like people got A's in high school. And I'm also a visual learner, so it's like memorizing something and regurgitating it just didn't work for me. So again, I focused on having fun, skateboarding, bike riding, stuff like that. I did decide to try college because my friends were going to college. That was it. That was the only reason. And I thought, well, what did I want to do in college? And I thought, well, I like the woods. Maybe I'll be a forestry ranger. I had done a lot of camping and stuff, and I thought, yeah, okay, maybe forestry. Well, my first semester in college, I took a biology class, and I failed. I was laughing because it's like I just couldn't do it. I couldn't retain the information. I had no studying skills. I just didn't really know how it worked, So I got an F, a big fat F, on my first transcript from my college, my first semester at college. And I just thought, yeah, maybe this isn't really my thing. So I quit. I stopped going. I was at a Penn State campus in New Kensington, near Pittsburgh. I stopped, worked at King's Restaurant, which is a restaurant that I worked at all through high school. And I did that for the second semester. And after that semester, and all my friends were off at school, some were working, I just thought, oh man, I don't really want to do this with my whole life. I'm going to be a short order cook all my life. And I knew, I was friends with people that worked there. It was totally cool for them at work, but for me, I was like, yeah, I kind of want to do some other things. I want to go out and live. So I decided to try college again. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well at least do something I'm interested in. And all I could think about was art, like art in general. So like art is huge, right? There's all kinds of art. There's performing art. There's visual art. There's sculpture, painting, drawing, photography, graphic design. The list goes on and on. So I wind up at school at IUP because a friend of mine went to IUP and studied art, and I was like, that's what I should try. So this is me, IUP, first semester. Of course, I'm drawing on a skateboard. A lot of funny things in this that are like, don't exist anymore for you guys. Rapidograph pens and cassette tapes, these are cassette tapes back there, all that stuff. So this is what I was doing in college. I was skating constantly. We were on the road. We would, break our legs, break our ankles, go back to school, have to deal with all that stuff. The other thing we were doing at school was we were driving into Pittsburgh, going to rock shows. So this was a place called the Electric Banana in Pittsburgh, and this was just a little punk rock nightclub. So we would roll down to Pittsburgh, a gang of us skateboarders, and we would go in this place, and this is what was happening in that. So in here was this. And again, whether you're interested in this or not is not the point. The point is, whatever you're interested in, that's your point. So this is kind of the energy that I was into, like the music, the skateboarding, it was all kind of interconnected. And it was very do-it-yourself. Did you have a question? Yeah. Not really. I kind of do my thing solitary in the studio, and I work for people all over the world, but I don't have to go there, I just use the internet. But I do travel a lot, because I like it. I like to go to other places. We can talk more about that. So the bands, the music, everything, it's a very creative life. And I was responding to it. I was like, this is so so great. I'm so into it. So the bands, you know, it's not a big corporate thing. It's not like you see it on TV, there are commercials. The way that kids knew about the shows was through flyers. So how do you get a flyer? Well, you just make it yourself, right? So how do you start a band? Well, you just start it yourself, and nobody knows how to play music, and you know, the whole punk rock thing was like all about, like, it didn't matter if you knew how to play it. Just start a band and see where it goes. So the flyers were the same way, and this was kind of a look, it was a style of art that I really liked because it was quick, it was guttural, it was like unprofessional, and it was a language of its own. So this is the house that I grew up in Delmont, and we built this skateboard ramp, and we would have parties and picnics and stuff, and people would come, and we'd have these little, get-togethers. And it was super fun, you know? So again, I'm in college, I'm kind of struggling along, I'm starting to take some classes that interest me. I'm doing sculpture, I'm doing painting, I'm trying out the arts. I did some acting, you know, some music, also taking biology and taking all my core stuff. And it's like, I'm kind of struggling. I'm doing okay, I'm getting B's, you know? So I'm realizing, like, oh, there's a lot to learn, and it's kind of interesting. But again, this is really what I was after, was having fun and having a good time. So a really long story condensed is that while I was in college, I was working at a little skate shop in Pittsburgh. So again, skateboarding, again, you know. While I was there, you know, parents would bring their kids in and they'd buy them a skateboard. And I got to talking with one mom, and she said, oh yeah, I'd love to, you know, my kids would love to skate on one of those half pipes. And I said, oh, we have one. Bring your kids out on Saturday. So I was a little bit outgoing, you know, I said, bring them out. She brought her little yippers. They were like, I don't know how old they were, maybe 10 or 8 or something like that. I remember the one kid was a little bit complaining. But they came out and during this picnic, and the kids had a good time, and this woman was like, yeah, hey, what are you doing in college? And I said, oh, I'm studying art, and I'm an art major, and I don't really know what I'm doing, you know, blah, blah, blah. So a few months later, I think it was like 6 months later, she came back into the skate shop, and she said, John, do you remember me? You know, you invited us out. And I said, yeah, sure. So she said, I was just in Santa Cruz, California, and I met this guy, you know, it's a skateboard company, and I told him all about you. And he said to give him a call and come out and work for him. And I'm like, this lady is crazy. Like, what is she talking about? Because again, I'm from a small town, it's like, I wasn't really used to that kind of thing, right? But I thought, well, what do I have to lose? So I called this guy, his name was Dale Smith. And he said, yeah, you know, I'd love to see some of your work. I sent him my portfolio, which wasn't even a portfolio, it was just some papers that had done drawings and designs on it. And anyway, he said, yeah, why don't you come on out and work for me this summer? So I was just like, yes, because when I was 10, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm moving to California as soon as possible. So anyway, it kind of worked out. I went out, I worked for this guy, and this was my first, that was my first night. So I flew into San Francisco, the guys that worked at the shop picked me up. We stopped at a pool in San Jose and had this kind of, you know, it was kind of an amazing skate session for a kid from Pennsylvania to all of a sudden, you know, be in California doing this. So it was so cool. Worked for him for the summer, and this is what I was doing. I was making like t-shirt designs for skateboard contests and stuff like that. Now, the one thing I was doing in high school, I had an art class, and in the art class we learned how to make silkscreen t-shirts. Now, I really liked doing that. So I had a little bit of a background making, you know, like band t-shirts and stuff. So I jumped into this, started making t-shirts. And this, I mean, I'm not showing you this because I think it's good. It's actually terrible, but it's kind of where I started. And, you know, this, he had a, ooh, it's still on? It's gonna be the battery. Oh yeah, the battery's dead. Can you hear me if I talk like this? No. Let me give you this so it doesn't interfere. This guy that owned this company, he had started this little surfwear company with a friend of his from Australia. So this was the first shirt that we did for that. And what's kind of interesting about this shirt is, you know, these designs, it's like, oh, a snowboard guy, a skateboarder with a ramp in the back. And so you guys that did this little exercise with me, where we combined ideas and we made like a concept. This was the first time. This was the first time that I did that, and I didn't mean to do it. But like, this is a narrative image. This image tells a story, right? So it's like the evolution of turtle to surfer. No, it's absurdly stupid, but it was the first time I made something that actually like had an intellectual component to it. It had a cool idea, right? So I did this for the summer, went back, finished my last year of college at IUP, and then I had a job. You know, so when I finished college, Dale said, you know, come out, I'll give you a job, pay $500 a week. You know, you can start your career out here, blah, blah, blah. So I did that, moved out. I worked for him for about 6 months, and I just thought, oh, I'm not learning anything, and, you know, I better figure out something else to do. So I answered an ad in the newspaper, which is like a Craigslist thing, you know, to see like a job offering. And it was in San Francisco, and it was for a record company. So again, it's like music, skateboarding, it's all connected. So I'm very in tune, I'm going to shows in San Francisco, and I see this ad, and I think like, oh, graphic designer. I graduated from college with a graphic design degree, which is the closest thing to illustration. So I answered the ad, I got the job, I went up, and I started making t-shirts for a record company. So there was a whole team of people in the art department, and we just sat around and listened to music all day and made t-shirt designs for rock bands and stuff like that. So these were just, you know, just kind of embarrassing, really, some of this stuff, but it was kind of a learning process, and it was really interesting to work with other people doing this kind of work. Then, about a year later, I thought, oh man, I'm not learning anything. It's like, I can't keep doing this forever. I got to do something else. So again, I still don't really know what I'm doing. I'm kind of driven. My family is, you know, they're German. My dad worked in the mill. There's a strong work ethic in my family. And I work really hard. Even though I don't know what I'm doing, I want to work really hard. So like whatever's put in front of me, I go at it 1,000%. So I did that with the t-shirt company, kind of did everything I could do there, and I'm like, all right, what's next? I got to do something else. So, a very long story, condensed. Somebody that I knew from college had a twin brother in San Francisco, and this guy was a graphic designer, and he had gone back to get a degree in college, and one of his teachers worked at this company, Adobe Systems. So you guys all know Photoshop, right? Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. Who uses Adobe Photoshop in here? Who's ever used that program? It's a really awesome program where you can edit photos and make art and stuff like that. So this was the company that was making that. And I asked this guy if he would look at my portfolio. Because I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm this young kid from Pennsylvania, and I'm in San Francisco, and I'm talking to rock stars on the phone, and I'm making t-shirts for their concerts. And I thought that was pretty cool. So this guy looked at my work, and he was like 10 years ahead of me in his career. And he goes, John, I don't know what to tell you, dude. It's like, you need to go back to school. You're really not working at a professional level yet. You need to develop more. And I was like, I felt like someone cut my leg off or something, you know. But I kind of knew he was right. But I wasn't about to go back to college yet, because like 4 years was enough for me. And I didn't really have the money, and I didn't really want to take out a loan and all that stuff. So that relationship with that guy, Don Donahue was his name, he was from Crescent, not far from here. He said, well, maybe we could get you an internship. So one of his teachers was an art director at Adobe Systems, and they were taking interns to work on, you know, new software products. So I thought, well, that wouldn't hurt. You know, maybe I could try that. So I got the internship with Adobe and went down, you know, worked on Photoshop as a guinea pig. Anyway, long story short, it was a really great opportunity, and I started making art in a way that I hadn't before on a computer, right? Because before that, like, nobody was doing it. So this was like the very beginning of being able to use a computer to make art. So that's what I did. I started making stuff up. So these are just made up projects. I made up a skateboard company called Planet, and I made a little logo, and I made a tag, and then I made some ads. And this is before Adobe Photoshop was even released to the public. So they were just having us like, hey, what can you do with this software? And I would just take photos of myself and kind of tinker with them in Photoshop. And I had a friend in LA who was in this band called Big Drill Car, so I made a fictitious album cover for him, CD cover. And then I made up a yacht company and made some drawings of yachts. And just teaching myself how to do it, because there was no real instruction. So my education was kind of when I started working, when I got out of school, when I really started to learn things. And I started to get really excited about learning in this environment. So posters, and then, so I'm still working at the record company, and I thought, boy, it'd be really cool to work at Adobe, because you make a lot more money, and it's kind of a cool company, and they have a pool table, and they have snacks, and it was just kind of a great place to work. So I finally got hired there, and started doing more official projects. This was a poster for the second version of Photoshop that came out. But what I was doing was graphic design. So like, this is really important. When you're figuring out what you want to do, unless you're one of those really lucky people that just totally knows what you want to do from the get-go. Like, I have a niece, she wants to be a doc, and she's going to be a doc. She's on her way to being an MD, and I know that's everybody in the family knows that's what she's going to do. But for me, it was a series of steps, try this, step, and I kept figuring it out as I was going along. So when I got to this point, I had to work my butt off to get to California, to work at the record company, and then to work, at Adobe. And I thought that's what I really wanted. I thought I wanted to be a graphic designer. I thought I wanted a regular paycheck. I thought I wanted to be safe. And frankly, I hated it. It was like really uptight. It was really rigid. It was really structured. And that was great for a lot of people, but for me, it just wasn't my thing, right? So I started to experiment with the software and make my own pictures just at night and on the side. So I was making stuff like this with the software, and I was trying to kind of develop a language, like a visual language or a style of art. So I was copying some other artists that were doing computer work at the time, there weren't that many. And I was doing stuff like this, which looked stiff, and I showed it to a friend, and he was like, no, man, this is not you. This is not your thing. Why don't you go back and redo this illustration, but do it the way that you would do it. So I did it like this, and then it started to feel a little bit better, and then this was the final piece. So about this time, I wound up with a whole bunch of pictures that I had made, and I sent them to a magazine, art director in Southern California. It was a surfing magazine, a music magazine, and he published a bunch of this stuff. And nobody was really doing art like this at the time, and I didn't know any better, so I just kept doing it, and then it started to get published in magazines. And right about that time, just to be super frank with you guys and honest, somebody very close to me died. It was horrible. What was I going to do? It was really, really a down point in my life at that point. So I just started to make pictures, and that's how I dealt with the situation. So these are not happy pictures, but they were pictures that kind of helped me get through a very difficult time in my life. So I wound up with all these kind of disturbing images, many of which I've edited, because you guys are younger. We were joking around about editing out the slideshow. But I wound up with a bunch of this work, and I started to show it to people. And it started to be published in this magazine called Raygun in Southern California. And all of a sudden, people are calling me out of the blue. I don't even know how they're getting a hold of me. And they're saying, hey, we really like your art. Could you do a piece of art for our magazine or for our book or whatever? And I was like, wow, people do that for a living. That's what I want to do. So I was about 24 years old, maybe 24, 25 years old. That's when I really actually realized what it was that I wanted to do. So it was a long process for me of, middle school, high school, college, I don't know what I'm doing, and then working and, doing the corporate thing, and then finally finding what I really wanted to do. So I just kept making the images. Some of these things turned into CD covers, some of them turned into posters, some of them were in magazines, like here's an example of something that was in a magazine. So now I'm still working at Adobe. I don't care that much about money because I was living cheap, I wasn't married, I had no expenses, it didn't really matter to me. Again, it's like having fun was like kind of the priority. I had enough money to have fun, but it was pretty nice having a regular paycheck, and working at a company that has stability. I could pay my rent in San Francisco, which is expensive. And I thought, boy, it would be really nice to just make art all the time and not have a day job and just do illustration. So I talked to my dad, and he said, well, why don't you just give it a try? Why don't you think about it, give it a try. It doesn't hurt to try it out, which was really encouraging to me. Because my dad was like totally not art oriented at all. He was very like rigid and just like, you gotta have security. So long story short, I took a month. I went with my skateboarding pals. We went to Europe. We bought Eurail passes. We just lived on the road and skateboarded for a month. And that experience of traveling to a different culture or a different place made me realize like, oh yeah, right, you could just do whatever you want. Sure, I'll go back, I'll quit working at Adobe, and I'm going to give this a go. So that's what I've done for the past 25 years. I haven't had a real, like, quote, real job, although I do work really, really hard. I work long hours, and I work hard. I give it my all the time. So this was my very first job. This was for a band in San Francisco called Jester, and this was a piece of art that I did. And they saw it, and they were like, oh, we used that on our CD cover. So I didn't get paid for it, but they used it, and then other bands started calling me to do other art. And then this was a project for a design firm in San Francisco. I didn't get paid for this. This is the first month that I left my job. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I just left my job, and I'm doing all this work, and I'm not getting paid. Like, money isn't my number one priority, but like I do need to eat. I have to think about how I'm going to eat. So these were divided pages in a book, and they dealt with themes, and they were kind of, like unhappy themes. So I had a little bit of a reputation for doing this art that was a little bit intense and dealt with violence and social issues, stuff like that. Love, that was my take on love at the time. Not super happy. And then I started to get some calls from magazines like Macworld and PC World, because like the whole computer thing. So Con Valley was taken off, and everybody was like starting to do all their work on computers. So I did a lot of work for magazines, and I started to get paid a couple $100, $500 here and there. And I thought, well, I could just keep doing this for a living. So I had the contact with Adobe. I would go back to Adobe. They would hire me as a contractor. I would do images for packages like this, more CD covers. This was a project I did with a crazy lady in Oakland. She was a Chinese woman who was a calligrapher. And her career, she was super successful. Her career was doing hand lettering. That's all she did for 30 years. Every box in the supermarket, every Walmart, you name it. If it's hand scripted, Lily did it. She was like the guru of hand lettering and writing letter forms. That was her career. She was really good at it. She made a lot of money, and she was very successful. So she called and said, hey, can you put some of your color and your skateboard, punk rock, silkscreen t-shirt thing into some texture, and let's do some postcards together. So we did a series of these postcards. She sent them out to a bunch of people. There was like A, B, and C. And she got a call back from an agency in Santa Monica, California, that did all the advertising for Honda Motor Company. And they said, hey, we'd like to hire you guys to do all the brochure covers for our new line of cars. And so Lily doesn't tell me that it's Honda. She's like, John, you come down LA. So San Francisco, where I live, was about 7 hours drive from LA. And she said, John, you come down. And I was like, well, Lily, I can't just like come down there. She was like, no, you come down. So I get down there, and we go into this big, fancy meeting, and Lily has orange hair and purple pigtails, and she's holding like 2 armfuls of Girl Scout cookies. And we go into this big, fancy advertising agency, and I'm like, I look like a bike messenger. I was wearing shorts and my backpack and stuff. And I walked in the front door, and the receptionist said, "Oh, you can just drop the packages there." And I was like, "No, I'm here for a meeting." So anyway, at the end of the meeting, they hired us to do this giant job of creating these covers. So these are the covers of like a brochure. Like if you go to buy a new car, they give you this really awesome brochure that makes you really want the car. And the concept was to use textures and color and Lily's hand calligraphy to kind of create an emotion about the cars. So this was like insane. This was like the biggest job ever. And I'll just tell you, because like the people don't usually talk about money and stuff, but we got paid $80,000 for this job, each. She got 80 and I got 80, and it took us about 2 months to do the job. So here I am, this 27-year-old kid. I just made $80,000 in a couple of months, and I was just like, holy mackerel! I mean, this is like, this is amazing. I've never done a job and got paid that much since. That was like in the early 90s. But it really did start to click to me that this was like a viable, legit career that one could have. So I started to take what I did from that project. I started doing more personal art, things like this. I started mixing drawings like we did downstairs, you guys, you younger guys and gals. And I started mixing them with photographs using Photoshop, because I was really familiar with it. And that led to this kind of thing. So I started making up projects for myself of, like reading an article, and then I would kind of make a picture about the art. So this was about a young woman from Eastern Europe that had come to America. And I made this picture, and it won some awards in these illustration magazines. And next thing I know, I'm getting calls from other magazines that saw this award book that came out with illustrations in it. So I get a call from the New Yorker. So has anybody ever heard of a magazine called the New Yorker? Yeah. It's the bomb. It's the magazine of magazines. They have the best illustrators, the best photographers, the best writers. It's like the top. So I got a call from this magazine that said, "Oh, we really like that portrait that you did. Do you want to try it in illustration?" So I was like, sure. So this was the first illustration that I did for them, and it was about this big. It appeared this big, a couple inches in the magazine. And that led to a second illustration of Moby, a musician, and that led to a third illustration in the magazine, and they're getting a little bit bigger. That led to another one, and another one. Films, bands, social commentary, more dance projects, more bands, movie reviews, and these are showing up in the magazines. So, again, I didn't have a plan. I didn't really know what I was doing. But at this point, being published in that particular magazine opened literally the floodgates to like the whole world. So anybody that buys illustration or hires somebody like me, they look at the New Yorker, right? So being in the New Yorker consecutively all the time, it was like, oh, people are emailing me from Italy. Oh, people are emailing me from Spain, from France, from Germany, wanting to hire me for jobs to make illustrations for them. And I'm just still having fun. It's still really fun for me. It's a challenge, and the intellectual component is starting to catch up. So now I'm reading. I never read as a kid because I was busy. I was busy going fast and doing fun things. So reading is not huge for me. But in my mid-30s, I started to read everything I could get my hands on. Every newspaper, every magazine, every classic. It's like I was just on fire for reading. Because I started to realize, like, reading is the word form of what I was doing pictorially, right? So The more you know about the world, the more you can do this. Because like, making a good picture is not just about making it look cool, it's about the thinking behind it. It's about the intellectual part of it. And that's where the reading comes in. You know, much like the sciences and some of the things that you heard earlier today. You know, it's like what you're thinking about and how you can kind of put pieces together and how you can kind of intellectualize and conceptualize. These become more important. But listen, you guys, you don't have to worry about it right now. It comes. It comes when it's time. So I kept doing this, kept having fun, kept experimenting, working very hard. So a typical day for me like this, so although I'm not going to an office, I'm not working at a real job, I go to the studio at 8 o'clock in the morning. I totally concentrate from 8 until noon. At noon, I go out, I stuff some food in my mouth, I take a skate break, go to the skate park or something for an hour, come back 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock, total concentration. Go home, have dinner with my family, you know, take an hour or two, kids are in bed, back in the studio, work from 9 until midnight, 1, sometimes 2. Get up, do it again. I did that for probably 15 solid years. You know, now it's getting kind of old. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't stay up that late. You know, it's like, it's getting harder. But that's what it took to make this happen, right? That type of work ethic. And you know, everybody has like one thing they want to leave with you know, a group of people when you talk to them. The one thing I would say to you guys is, like, you've got to work. Whatever it is that you decide to do, whatever your thing is, even if it's as ridiculous as skateboarding, you've got to like do it 1,000%. You can't like kind of do it. And that's just what it takes, you know? You really have to give it your all. So that led to, you know, like bigger pieces and fiction pieces and full page pieces, and the more of this stuff that shows up in the New Yorker, then it's like, oh, other magazine covers for the Atlantic and Time covers, and you know, now it's like, oh well, now I'm doing Time covers. That's crazy, you know? They pay you a lot, everybody sees it, it's like a big deal to do a Time cover, right? Not so much now, because like, you know, publishing industry is kind of dying, but because everybody looks at everything online. On hard work, you know, so here, this is an image that was done for a poem. It illustrated a poem. It's called The Mistress's Daughter. And, you know, what do you think when you look at this? It's like, it's cool. You know, it's not, how hard could that be to make that, right? Some photographs put together. This is what it took to make that. Every one of those files took me at least 4 hours. So it's like experiment, 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 experiment. And then each one is its own sketch, and I would send that to the client, and I'd say, hey, what do you think of this? They're like, not right, you know, it needs to feel a little more this way. That is probably 40, 50, 60 hours worth of work to get to that. So when we were doing those drawings earlier, and I said, you know, it's like, don't freak out if you don't have a really good idea right off the bat. It's a process. So everything is a process. Developing a good idea is a process. Getting an education in high school is a process. Your life is a process. It's like one thing after another after another. And all you have to really do is just one step at a time. It's not like, you don't have to like be from here to over there. You just do one step at a time. And, you know, do your best every step. This is another project about the AIDS epidemic in America, or in Russia it was. And these are the first sketches. This was the second sketch. This is the third sketch. It's like none of these ideas are working. I keep showing, you know. And then it's like with illustration, if you're making a picture for a book or something, you don't want to put the word in it. Because if you put the word in it, you're kind of defeating the purpose of making the picture. Because otherwise you just write about it. So I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I started to introduce the word, that wasn't working. And then I came up with the actual virus, you know, an image of the actual virus itself as this big monolithic thing that's coming down on these people. And that sketch turned into this sketch. And see, I use myself on all these images. So it's always me. I photograph myself or my wife or my kids or whatever. That turned into this, you know, got a little more bloody, a little more biological. And it's all accurate, you know. That turned into this, and hours and hours and hours of development. in the studio, blasting music, just keep working on it, keep working on it, keep working on it. That led to this, and then finally, this is how it appeared in the magazine. So this won tons of awards in the design industry and illustration stuff, and it just spawned more work. You know, to the point it's like, I can't do all the work. You know, it's like I have to hire people and take on some interns and some mentor some people, kind of bring them along and help them. So now I'm like a little army doing my style of work, and I have all these kids working with me, which is really fun, you know, because of course they're all skateboarders and music people. And I get them through classes. This is how I make my pictures. I take pictures of myself in the position I need to be in for the illustration. I take eyes, I take pupils, I take different facial expressions, and I cut it all apart, and I put it back together, and then colorize it. So I don't really even know how to draw. And here's the other really honest to goodness thing, you guys. I'm not super smart. I don't draw well. I'm not classically trained. I'm a mediocre at best photographer. I do all these things kind of like okay, but I've found my way to put all of those things together that's truly unique. And that has allowed me to have a career and to do something really fun and kind of, you know, support my family and, you know, live a creative life. So this is my wife, you know, I get all these people to model for me. Like, you know, if I have a project and I need somebody running down the hall, this guy was a student, and I was like, hey, can I just take a quick snap of you, you know, for this project I'm working on? And that turned into this book cover for Random House. And they liked this guy so much that he became like the face of this whole series of children's books, like teen books, which he liked. And then I pay him a little bit for modeling, and I get paid, and it all works out. Neighborhood kids, some girl that lived down the street. This is the Donahue twin. This is the guy who in San Francisco said, you should really go back to school, you don't know what you're doing. You know, so he's modeled for me a bunch of times. This is Terry, got it beside my studio in Pittsburgh. This was a young kid that I kind of was pals with and skateboarded with. And you can get your friends to do almost anything if you tell them it's for work.